Hi, Luis. I'm on the go, so I thought I'd better leave you a voice note. Like always. Yeah, the moment is here. We all knew was coming. We've raced the last lap. The longest and most successful partnership in Formula One history. Who would have thought that when we started the journey? It's been a crazy ride for a boy from Stevenage who had a dream. And who shared his journey with us at Mercedes. So now, you're opening up a new chapter with Ferrari. But most important, remember one thing. Find your people. Not just the ones who work with you or sign your contract. Obviously, we know that's important. But the ones who dream with you, who fight with you, who have your back and your ear. The ones who stand with you and kneel with you. The ones who see you, including the parts you don't want seen. Who never stop believing, even when you do sometimes. Because when you find your people, you don't just beat the world, you change it. And whatever the future holds, just remember, we will always be your people. Because every dream needs a team. You know it. Take care, my friend. See you on track. We are really looking forward to it. That's the most important message I've ever sent.
World champions, baby. I was gonna wear this jacket the entire show, but it's too damn hot. If you're not watching and you're listening, I'm holding up my McLaren Formula One team jacket that I bought a couple years ago. That still works, and it's hot. It's really hot when I put it on. So it's good for a cold weather race like Montreal. Look at that. Yeah. Papaya's number one, baby.
I was wondering what you were hiding there, Adam. Like,
yeah.
You're like really sneaky. You're like, I'm bringing this thing up. I'm like, hey.
I'm so happy, Tim. I can't even tell you. So happy.
Well, you wore it to your event that you were at yesterday, didn't you?
Yeah. So my other podcast, in case you're listening to this show and you don't know about the other shows on our network, I have a hockey podcast with Steve Dangle and Jesse Blake. It's called the Steve Dangle Podcast, and we did an event in Kingston yesterday here in Ontario. And it's interesting because there were questions in our Q&A period about the Formula One race, and I had several people come up and ask about this show, ask about what thoughts on next year and that sort of thing. So there's plenty of Nailing the Apex fans in attendance last night, Tim, which was
nice.
Great.
Good to hear.
Yeah, and somebody asked like who they think the winner is going to be next year, and Jesse said Ferrari with Lewis, and I said McLaren, and I said Lando, but I might have to, the Oscar Piastri sure does have that edge, doesn't he?
Definitely does, man, for sure. Yeah, I mean, I think everyone who I talk with in the paddock, I think we all say the same thing, that he'll give Lando, everything. Like he'll give him everything. So that's, I guess when it comes down to it, I think like Oscar is still lacking with qualifying pace.
Yeah.
And I think once he kind of learns what that sort of looks like for himself, which does take time, I think he'll be out qualifying Lando quite a bit. Like Oscar's a very strong driver, man. Like he's unreal.
He's unreal, and he's like my favorite right now. I just love watching him race. I love it, and it's
really good.
Yeah, he is, and it's fun to be able to talk about McLaren in this way because as a Leaf fan, Toronto Maple Leafs, if you're not familiar with their history, and I know Tim's very familiar with their history, they don't win ever. They haven't won since 1967. And so, the other teams that I pick in different sports or whatever tend not to win either. The only team championship I'd really seen from a team that I really, really cheer for are the Pittsburgh Steelers in 06 and 09. Mm-hmm. And so this was my first Formula One. I'm rooting for this team championship. Like, it's crazy, I started watching Formula One, I think, when Villeneuve was in, and I was like 8. So how much am I really absorbing? I didn't know enough to pick a team and that sort of thing. So to see McLaren get a constructors championship, I know everybody cares about the drivers one, less about the constructors. But I can tell you, Tim, and you can back this up because you were in Abu Dhabi. Mm-hmm. The teams care. Yes. They care about the team championship.
Yeah, Adam, I was doing some work for Formula One. And so I was working with Jacques Villeneuve, Jean Alesi, David Coulthard, Damon Hill, Tom Christensen.
Wow.
Worked with got to do some stuff with Zach Brown and Andrea Stella all weekend long. And so I was around them for most of the weekend. And we did this thing down in pit lane with a bunch of like guests and stuff. And it was after checkered flag had come out, and I was in pit lane, and everyone in the McLaren garage were like cheering louder than the cars were. And the cars are really loud, man.
Yes.
Don't get me wrong here. It's not like I'm saying they're not loud, but they were screaming and cheering. And then Lewis came around, he's doing donuts in front of me and stuff. It was pretty awesome to be a part of, but to see how much they care about the Constructors Championship. I mean, some people may think that it's all about the drivers, but being there and then seeing sort of that raw emotion and energy, you kind of get a better understanding with, wow, the Constructors, I would argue, means just as much, if not more, than
to the teams,
drivers,
yeah.
To the teams. Like they were, I've never experienced, I've seen it on television, but I've never been to a sort of a championship deciding race. This year, got to see, I was in attendance working. Max Verstappen won his championship in Las Vegas, interviewed him, etc. This year, it was Abu Dhabi, same year, McLaren winning the Constructors. And I would say that the drivers is a lot different from the team's championship and the amount of emotion that's involved. I mean, the teams do care. Yes, they celebrate. Yes. But this one comes with bonuses, Adam, right?
Yeah.
There's $140 million that McLaren is going to get. And the team, the mechanics, the crew, I'm assuming a lot of the folks who work back at home base also are getting like bonuses. And so, yeah, for sure, I can see why everybody's super jacked and everything. But they poured onto the racetrack, Adam. Like, it was such a scene. It was great. I congratulated a bunch of the guys who I know very well at McLaren. Yeah, just told them, I'm like, you guys really deserve this. You won this. You deserve it outright. And so if anyone's ever questioning, like, how it's not exciting, it is. Trust me, it means a lot to these teams.
I think so too, and I mean, you could see that from the partying. You could see the big smiles with Oscar and Lando, and it really was the race we were asking for from Lando the entire year. It was a great start. He held the lead all the way through the first lap, like through the first quarter. And obviously we lost. We had some attrition on that. Oscar Piastri especially, and we'll talk about that in a second. Not thrilled with Max Verstappen, and I was surprised it was only a 10-second penalty, but that's all you can really call, I guess. Let's talk about the race from Lando Norris and the fact that this guy's had nothing but doubters all year long. There were people, I even saw people prepping like, oh, if he wins the championship this year, he's a fraud anyway. People are harsh in this sport. And there were times this year where, and we've talked about this, we wanted to see a little bit more bite from Lando, a little bit more F you, a little bit more I dare you to touch my car because you're going into the wall or you're going to spin out or we're both going out or whatever. And I think specifically we highlighted things like Austria where, Max put him off the track and then they had a chat about it afterwards. But then the next couple races, Max goes and does it all again. Tim, what did you see from Lando today that makes you believe or not believe that he can be a world champion as a driver on his own?
Kept it together when the pressure was on, right, Adam? I mean, like with Piastri going out, and again, we can get into that in a little more detail in a few minutes. It was all on his shoulders, right? Because if he had have dropped out of first place, I mean, if the Ferraris were like 1-3 and Lando finished second, then if my math is correct, championship would have went to Ferrari. And if he hadn't made one small mistake here or there, but he wasn't, he was flawless, right? He held the pace that he needed to, extended the gaps when he needed to, when he knew Carlos was going to start pushing when they swapped over to the hard tires. He knew how to keep that gap and maintain the position without overheating the hard tire, where Carlos was sort of the opposite, which Ferrari has troubles with. They do have trouble with the hard tire, but I mean, Carlos would push and he would overheat the tire, have to cool it, and then try again, where Lando could just maintain that consistency. Granted, he had free air, yes, but he didn't make any mistakes.
Right.
He didn't. He was flawless. He dominated. I'm going to say that because didn't put a wheel wrong. And I think, Adam, like when we talk about doubters and his doubters, and yes, there are a lot. And when we also talk about like, hey, is this guy world championship material? I think coming into the season, he didn't believe he was world championship material.
You think that really?
I don't think he thought he could win a driver's championship this year. But I think somewhere along the lines, he started to learn how to believe more in himself. And he started to believe more that he could do it. And he started to believe more that he could beat Max Verstappen. And the more he raced against Max, the more he learned. And the more he learned, you could see that it was transferred into the next race and then into the next race. And then you could start to see that sort of evolution of Lando Norris. I would say he's a different driver at the end of this season compared to the beginning of this season. And I think he would say the same thing as well. And that has me pretty excited for next year, Adam, because I can see that there is a driver there who has really learned a lot this year about what it's going to take to win a driver's championship and what he needs to do. And I think he understands the little tiny points where his weaknesses are now that he just needs to improve just a tiny little bit, right? Because every driver has weaknesses. And I think he understands also, Adam, where Max Verstappen's weaknesses are. Because and I think he saw that in Mexico. And I think he learned, honestly, man, I think he really learned a lot in Mexico. And just talking to a lot of people who are pretty well connected within that circle, like they would say the same thing.
Hold on, I want to pause you there, because for anybody that doesn't recall races the way we do, right, and pick them out of thin air, it's like, oh yeah, I remember that Grand Prix, whatever. What happened in Mexico?
Well, him and Max had a battle at him.
Right. And but the context of that is like, what would he have? I know that. Yeah, of course. Like, what do you remember about that battle that stood out, I guess, that he would have learned from? Let's to get granular.
Max was willing to sacrifice his race just to win a championship. He
pushed Lando off the track, and
exactly.
Yeah, okay.
But he ended up getting like a massive amount of penalties for it, and Lando did well to avoid the collision. And at that moment in the championship, Lando had to avoid anything that he could because he was the one trying to chase down Verstappen. Max had nothing to lose, but he also learned that the more pressure he puts on Max, the more that Max is prone to maybe being over aggressive or making mistakes sometimes. And I think Lando's starting to understand where some of those weaknesses are. And that's super important, man, when you're trying to win a championship. That's what Lewis Hamilton does so well. Like, he just understands where his competitors' weaknesses are, right? And he picks at them, and he knows he knows what he needs to do to get things done, man. And I think for Lando, I think next season, I think he will be a championship contender. There is no question about it. Now,
with Oscar and with Max, obviously, first lap, Max bumps Oscar. Max gets a 10-second penalty, but Oscar's quote is beautiful. He said, "That's a world championship move right there." Yeah. And he's got a very dry sense of humor. It's very, it's actually a little bit Mark Webber, like his agent. And maybe it's an Australian thing. So I got to ask you, Tim, what did you think of that move for Max? Because I've seen some criticism lately of people saying Max is not a great wheel-to-wheel driver. Do you agree with that criticism? Because it always ends up where he's bumping someone.
Oh, I disagree with that for sure. I mean,
okay.
I think that he sent that from so far back that I'm gonna question that maneuver, man. Like that. He shouldn't have done that. Like he should, and I think Max should have even known better that he wasn't going to be able to pull that off. But it's kind of like one of those moments. He gets a great start. He gets past one car, and it's superhero time, right? And it's here comes the cape, and then he goes right in and takes the two of them out and ruins both of their races. I would say that that's a really tough corner to pull off a pass like that, especially on the start. And then also getting a piece of that, and no one really talked about it, but getting a piece of that inside curbing.
Yes.
That also doesn't help. Like that, it is a very difficult corner to pull something off. Like it, being there, seeing it in person. Adam, I was doing stuff on the track all weekend long. I was on the track all weekend long as well, like circulating, like doing, like we were driving on it and stuff. And like, even I was like, I know, like I've done turn one in like a real Formula One sim, like a lot. Like I've done this track in Abu Dhabi, like a lot. And I'm like, it's tight on the sim. And then I experienced it firsthand, and I'm like, yeah, it's really tight in real life. And so that pass was never going to stick, man. There was always going to be a collision. Oscar had no clue that he was coming. He didn't know that he was there. Good on Max, though, for apologizing afterwards. And I don't think enough people are talking about that.
No, there isn't.
And they should. Because Max did apologize to Oscar for taking him out. And that's great. That's great from Max. And then Oscar apologized to oh, crap, I forget who. Oscar took out who did he bump into? Oh, Valtteri. I think it was Valtteri. He hit up the start. Yeah, okay.
And Valtteri lost it.
To him, so.
Yeah, and Valtteri DNF'd. So it was yeah, okay. Well, that's cool. I mean, a little bit of respect with the drivers. I have a feeling that Oscar and Max, we haven't seen the last of the two of them going head to head a little bit more. Like, it was more Lando versus Max this year, but I feel like the Oscar versus Max is coming.
It does feel like a little foreshadowing, though, doesn't it?
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Do you get that feeling, though, Adam? Like, once you saw that, weren't you just like, yeah, you know what? This kind of makes sense. Like, I can kind of see maybe some more of that a little later on in 2025, possibly.
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely.
Because I just feel like Oscar's, I just get the sense that he really does just stand as good. He reminds me of Mark Webber, is basically what I'm trying to say.
Yeah.
He really does. And as I was a big fan of Mark Webber's. I really liked the way Mark raced. I really did. And I think I kind of get the same sense with Oscar. And then, obviously Max is Max, right? And there's a reason why he's a 4-time Formula One world champion, Adam. And so I think it's going to be one hell of a 2025 between those two as well.
I would agree with you. I think it's going to be fun. Now, let's talk a little bit about Ferrari. Charles Leclerc had a great race. Fantastic race. Had the issue in qualifying, and obviously had the gearbox change, so that put him in 20th. And that's a tough place to start in Formula One. But he worked his way up. At the end of the race, Charles and Carlos did everything they possibly could to grab the number one spot. They're second, they're third. Anything that you can do to try to win that championship. And as Charles said, it just wasn't enough. And he seemed very upset about the fact that it wasn't enough. He clearly wanted the win, and he clearly wanted to do it with Carlos. Mm-hmm. I think everybody talks about the Car-Lando relationship and how great Carlos and Lando got along. But I don't know that a lot of people knew how great that Charles and Carlos got along, and how much he's going to miss him.
Yeah. First of all, I mean, like, Leclerc starting like P19, Adam, and making up I'm trying to remember, I think it was like 11 spots on the opening lap or something like that. It was awesome. He had an incredible start. And folks, you should probably go back and watch his onboard camera to watch his start in full, because it was pretty spectacular. And I don't think he thought he was going to have that kind of a start, but man, that sure saved him a lot of pain throughout the race that he could have faced. And I also want to just quickly touch on that 10-place grid penalty that he got for the energy store battery pack, essentially.
Oh, that's what it was, battery pack, yeah.
That they had to replace on his car. I'm like, why are we giving penalties for that? Like, why not just, can we just go back and sort of retool this where we don't, ruin a potential Constructors Championship final battle with an energy store, doing somebody in on a Friday when we haven't even gotten to the Grand Prix on a Sunday? Make it a fine, a big one, right?
Yeah.
Just make it a big fine, because it'll really, it's just going to ruin the race. I understand, there's no, you don't want to have these power unit energy store systems, battery packs, hybrid components. You don't want to have a war with that stuff, right? Where you can just keep bringing it and spending tons of money on it, because then that defeats the purpose of everything. Mm-hmm. I mean, just to make it a fine, make it a big fine. That, don't penalize the driver for it, because it's not their fault.
Right.
Because that's the way I look at it. And I think that sort of needs to be revisited. And I'm not the only one who thinks that either. I mean, a lot of those drivers I was working with over the weekend, they're thinking the same thing. So I just feel that what could have been if, like, let's say Charles Leclerc qualifies P1 and, Carlos Sainz qualifies P2.
Mm-hmm.
Then what happens?
Well, I think
maybe Carlos gets taken out.
Yeah. That's a good point. Yeah, it is a what if, but Ferrari had a really great year. It's been a while since they were this high up. It really has. As much as Ferrari.
I just think that for Leclerc, it's just trying to finish the season on a high note and having one hell of a race, taking his last stint as long as he could was super impressive. I mean, the team even, telling him like, hey, we're going to go with option C. And he's like, I don't know if that's going to work, guys. And sure enough, like, Charles had to make it work, and he did, because he was on an extremely aggressive race plan. And I don't know how he made it work, Adam. I don't even know how he finished P3. I thought Lewis Hamilton was coming to get him for sure.
Yeah,
because Hamilton was just on fire, and we'll get to him obviously, Adam. But
because we got to talk about him.
Just a very great drive from Charles, and I think moving that should give him some confidence in moving into next season, I would think.
It is also announced this morning that Santander, which has been a multiple-time Ferrari sponsor several times throughout the years and that sort of thing, they're moving over to Williams now because they're one of the main sponsors for Carlos Sainz. Is that correct? Mm-hmm. That's a bank, by the way, in Europe, for people that don't know.
Yeah, they'd be moving over for Carlos, yeah, for sure.
And I think it shows you the marketability that Carlos has, because and how much he is liked and how much he is followed. And in the English-speaking world, everybody loves Carlos here, but you can imagine in the Spanish-speaking world how much more that is heightened. Mm-hmm. Him and Fernando Alonso, and how important they are to the sport. For a brand to leave Ferrari, sponsoring a Ferrari, and going to a Williams, Tim, a couple years ago, 3-4 years ago, that would have been unthinkable.
Yeah, I mean, it's like you said, Adam. I mean, it speaks to the level of the marketability of Carlos, for sure. Mm-hmm. It only makes sense. I mean, I probably, if I'm owning that bank, I would have done the same thing, because I would want to be associated with Carlos, because he is extremely marketable, right? Like, he's fast. You know what? What's interesting, Adam? It's like, the more I get to spend in the paddock, the more I get to spend in the garages, the more I get to talk to people, the more I get to hang around at the races and stuff, I really start to learn. And I always kind of knew this, and we have talked about this in the pod, but I don't think I really talked about it in the effect that I probably should have, where it's like, teams really want Carlos because of how much he's able to push them to get better. And what he brings, his knowledge, and how he works with everyone to make teams better. And those are the things that we don't get to see. Like, we don't see how many hours he puts in the factory with everybody. We don't see how many hours he puts into the simulator. We don't see how many hours he's working with the engineers to say, hey, this part didn't work here, but this worked here. This is what it felt like here, but it didn't feel like that here. And analyzing everything over and over. And that says a lot as to why James Vowles tried to get Carlos Sainz, or was even speaking with him this time last year.
Right.
Because this time last year, Adam, nobody knew Lewis Hamilton was trying to get that Ferrari seat. We thought it was going to be Carlos Sainz getting renewed, but James Vowles, he didn't even know that, but he was still going to go after Carlos Sainz, because he's the guy he feels is going to take Williams to the next level. And everybody else seems to think that too. And you know what? I got buy-in for that once, now that I've seen like how Ferrari had a great start to the season. By the time they strapped a new floor to their car in Spain, they had this huge drop-off in Canada, and then they struggled, and they couldn't really figure it out. And the drivers were losing confidence because car was bouncing a lot through the high-speed stuff, and they weren't feeling great with the car anymore. They stuck with it, and we have to really talk about how Charles and Carlos worked together so well to help the team figure it out and get them back onto the right path and get them back in going in the right direction. And I think a lot of that has to do with the way Carlos and Charles work together. I think that also has a lot to do with the way the two of them work with the team and how much they push the team to get better. That's such a big thing. And I think Carlos taking that to Williams and working with Alex Albon on something like that, I think, man, I really think like Williams has a really bright future on their hands here with Carlos coming over, because he was fantastic over the weekend. Carlos
Yes, he was.
did everything he needed to do, Adam, to make sure that Ferrari should win the Constructors. He did everything that he needed to do to make sure he put the team into the best position possible to try and win the Constructors.
Yeah,
That's pretty admirable, man. Like, he didn't leave any stone unturned. Like, he was flawless all weekend.
Sure was. And this is going to be what's so exciting for Williams. And I think and I want to talk about Lewis Hamilton because it's interesting, last week he was saying things like, well, maybe I'm just not fast anymore. And that's Lewis talking when he's frustrated, right? He gets, he does, when he gets down, he gets really down. Mm-hmm. This weekend you kind of saw, Lewis absolutely still has it and was just charging up the field. Unbelievable race for him. It's just a shame he couldn't get on the podium. And Toto Wolff talked about the mistakes that they made in qualifying, sending him out there when they did. And he was just very upset about it. But Lewis had an amazing last race with Mercedes. It's not the fairy tale ending, but I would say as far as, when we were talking in Bahrain, when you were in Bahrain, and it was the start of the year, and I said, will Lewis Hamilton get at least one more win in a Mercedes? And we didn't think so at that point. And he got two. Mm-hmm. Pretty great last season for Lewis Hamilton with Mercedes. Tough car, didn't love it. But now he goes to Ferrari. He's going to work with one of the best young drivers in the world. He's going to work with a team that's completely on the rise. And their expectation is to win every year. That's Ferrari. Do you think that he's ready? He's excited? Do you get a sense of how he's feeling about things?
I mean, when you're like color coordinating your clothes when you're coming into the paddock, showing the transition with each day going into red, which was awesome, by the way.
Very cool. Really very cool.
He's ready. He's definitely ready. You know what? I was really shocked to see what happened to him on Saturday. I know he had the bollard, stuck underneath the car and stuff, and that probably didn't help with the tire temperature and everything on the prep lap, and I get that. But yeah, it did not go well for him on the Saturday, and I was like, oh boy, like, you don't want to end the season like this, back here. But again, like, had a great start, managed the tire well, and then working with Bono, like, to try and figure out what would be the best strategy. And he actually had said, like, once Bono told him, we didn't hear this on the race broadcast, but once Bono told him it's hammer time, he said that was like, that flicked a switch inside of him where he's like, okay, I know what that means. He's like, I know now what I have to do, right? And that means just flat out, buddy, like, go get him, kind of thing. And I think there were certain parts to the weekend where he could have easily, like, given up. It looked like a frustrating start to the weekend, and then qualifying didn't get any better. But yeah, he just never gave up. He kept at it, man. Like, he just kept at it, chipped away at it until finally things started coming around for him, and then he was able to go on the attack. And we didn't get to see the onboard camera of Lewis's pass on George into turn 9, I believe, on the last lap. You kind of saw it in the picture-in-picture, but once you see the replay of it, that's a big pass, man. Like, I seeing that corner in particular firsthand again over the weekend, you kind of look at it, it's like, that looks like a fun corner to really attack in. I don't know how much room there is on the outside of it. If you're going to pass somebody on the exit of it, it's easy for another driver to push you right off the track. Really easy. And man, just Lewis sticking right with it. George, being respectful, obviously, giving him enough racing room, and pulling off that pass. You should have heard the crowd, man.
Yeah.
They lost their mind. It was crazy. I remember I was in pit lane, and as soon as, like, checkered flag came out and they're on the cool down lap, all the main grandstand was just chanting his name. They weren't chanting for McLaren or anything else.
No, I don't.
Chanting for
Lewis.
For Lewis. But then they started to chant for like Lando and everything, and the fans obviously knew what was going on and the Constructors' Championship and all that stuff. But like, yeah, man, like people were just screaming for him. It was great.
So
really cool to be a part of that.
I think it's worth noting that the last 7 years, the winner of the Abu Dhabi Grand Prix has gone on to win the Drivers' Championship. So that could be good news for Lando.
Mm-hmm.
Lewis obviously.
I got to deal with Max, right?
Yeah. But Lewis, it seems like we could see a renaissance like this, where this 4-year period has sort of been his second. I don't know how to describe it other than like his not lost years, but years that you go back and you wish, kind of like his later years with McLaren. I wish there could have been more car there. And it would be very cool to see somebody his age be in the top 2, top 3 winning world championships. It'd be very, very cool. It would really cement a legacy that would be unmatched, I think.
Yeah, Adam, it kind of just feels like it's sort of that storyline where it's like the old guard, like fighting with the younger generation that's like rising up, this young, generation of talent that we have. I mean, obviously Max and Lewis had their thing, but like Oscar, Lando, Charles, George, just that whole group, and it kind of just feels like that, right? And it's going to be like, is this 40-year-old driver going to be able to like keep these young guys away?
Yeah.
And then what's Ferrari going to look like? Right?
Yeah.
How are they going to look as like a team? And I think, Adam, I think it's a good part to just talk a little bit about Frederick Vasseur, because like.
Yeah,
what he's done with the team, Adam, really turning them around internally.
Yep.
Like think about it, like 2 years ago with Mattia Binotto, right? They kind of just seemed like almost like a rudderless ship, where it was like you didn't really have like I don't want to say Mattia's not a leader. That's not what I'm trying to say, but it's like it seemed like there were so many different parts in Ferrari. Nobody kind of really came together as a giant team.
Right.
And there was one person just sort of leading the way, saying, you're doing this, you're doing this, you're doing this. This is what your job is. And then you kind of have Frederick Vasseur come in, and he kind of says, you're doing this, you're doing this, and you're putting everybody in places of strength.
Yes.
And
well,
giving the team confidence and keeping them calm.
It sometimes takes a fresh set of eyes. Mattia had been with the team for 20 years or something like that.
A very long time, yeah.
Yeah, and Ferrari are famously political at the Formula One team level. Like, there's no question that's always sort of been the case. As with any brand that sees any sort of success like they have, and I think John Elkman, Fred Vasseur, those guys have really changed. The Ferrari have become a very reliable. Their strategy's good. The car is going to be good every weekend. They're making great technological advances when they bring updates. They're not like a formerly great team that should be great but can't figure it out anymore, which is cool. Because I think the sport's better when Ferrari is a challenger. Whether or not they win, it's good for Formula One when Ferrari wins, and it's good for Formula One when Ferrari's in the hunt. If Ferrari isn't in the hunt, it's just not as exciting. It just isn't. And because they're so connected like this, and Tifosi are they're the biggest fan group, right? You want to have those people engaged, and I think it comes with a lot of pressure. But man, I got to say it's going to be exciting. I think Ferrari will just be the top story next year for the first month to see how Lewis does.
For sure. And I think, Adam, like, I'll be interested to see what type of performance the car has in, the opening months. Like, I'll be curious to know if, like, losing, Enrico Cardile over to who left to go to Aston Martin, I'll be interested to see how, like, what is the impact of him gone? What does that have on the team? Because he was obviously a big part of making this car and making sure that it was competitive, and losing a guy like that or a talent like that is very difficult. But that's where I take a look at, like, Frederick Vasseur, and I'm kind of like, you know what, I have confidence in what he does, so he will be the one who can not easily, but he can be the one who can sort of find someone that can be somewhat of a replacement for that until they kind of figure out where and what they really, really, really want to do. And that's going to be really important for them moving forward. And I'll be curious to see how they start the season, because if it's a bit of a struggle, Adam, off the start, then I think we can maybe equate that to losing Cardile, but that doesn't mean that they won't be able to, come back later in the season and fight for a championship, a world championship, a constructors championship. It's just staying in the game, right? Because I think that's what's going to be next year, right, Adam? Like, and we can do a pod on this later, but just trying to stay within stay there, right? Like, just don't let anyone get away. Just stay in it.
Yep, absolutely.
Stay in it.
I want to talk a little bit about Sergio. I know he's come up a little bit. Helmut Marko made the comment a few weeks ago about the team bonuses, and there's one driver that is the reason for that. Like I said earlier, love him or hate him, Helmut Marko is going to tell you what he thinks. And I think that Sergio's press conference was very interesting. I guess he was speaking to the F1 media afterwards, and they said, are you going to be in? And he's like, well, I have a contract. And
media pen.
I have a contract. And what we know is that there will be a sit down with the shareholders of Red Bull to see what the plan is for next year. The reality is Sergio brings a ton of money to the team, ton of sponsorship, ton of exposure in especially Latin American markets, and is a great ambassador, doesn't put a foot wrong. Like, you can't not love who Sergio the person is. You can't not love what he brings on the business side. Just needed the track side to hold up its end of the bargain, and it didn't this season. There are rumors circulating about Liam Lawson, but Liam Lawson DNF'd. He's had an okay year. I would say, listen, he's had some great moments, Liam Lawson, but I think it's a lot to just put him in to that spot. And then you have Isaac Hadjar, who just missed out on the Formula 2 championship to Gabriel Bortoleto this weekend as well, which was a really hard-fought, great championship in bad cars. If you have the F1 TV app, or if you have an ability to go back and watch, it might be worth looking into if you're a Formula 1 fan, because Formula 2 this year was pretty spectacular. I think, Tim, my question to you is, how do you see this all playing out? Hadjar seems like he's probably ready. Red Bull loves to take risks on young drivers with the Toro Rosso, AlphaTauri, V-Carb team, whatever they're going to get rebranded to in the future. I can't imagine V-Carb's going to stay, but who knows? What do you think happens here?
Oh, well, from my understanding, Sergio would have been meeting with the shareholders today, so we're taping this on Monday. But
today,
that could be later on in the week, and a decision wouldn't be made right away, I don't think.
Okay.
I think we would probably get a decision later on this week. It's such a musical chairs sort of thing, but yeah, Liam Lawson moving into the big team would be the understanding that he would be doing that. And then as Isaac Hadjar, obviously he would be going over to what's going to be a rebranded V-Carb. We just don't know what the name will be. But that being said, I think if you're going to do that, I think if you're Red Bull, you're going to have to give, this rookie time. Like, you can't just throw him in there and, okay, you're done in 6 months, buddy. It's like, no, you're going to put him in there. You got to give him time. Like, you got to let the driver grow. You got to let them learn. You got to let them understand. You got to that's what, like, I've been harping about now on the pod for the last few podcasts, where it's like, you got to give these young drivers time.
Mm-hmm.
They just need it. Liam Lawson going to the big team, if it were to happen, I'm not totally upset with that move. I think Lawson has so much confidence in himself anyways that even if it does get off to a shaky start, I don't think it's really going to dent his confidence, right? Going up against Max, though, is the thing. Like he just eats teammates up and spits them out. And I'm not saying that that's what he personally wants to do. I'm just saying he's that good. You're going up against, the best right now. And that can kill your confidence.
Yeah.
So that's where they need to be careful. And they also need to be careful what type of car they're going to make for next season either. Because like Max said, this thing needs to go back into the museum. He's done with looking at it. So whatever they're going to bring next year has to be way better. And they've had a lot of personnel move away from the team lately, Adam. And I'll be curious to see how they can make the car better.
Now, we've talked about it, but we're going to get asked the question, so I'm just going to bring it up. Yuki Tsunoda outqualified Liam most of the year, outqualified Daniel most of the year. Why not Yuki?
Yeah, I think that's a question that we're all trying to get an answer on because I think he deserves a shot. We'll see what happens with the testing that's going to happen here on Tuesday, and so we've got 2 test sessions. We've got a tire test session. We have a young drivers test session. I'm going to see it'll be interesting to see what plays out because Yuki will get a chance to jump into the RB20 and see what happens. Right, that's all you can do. I mean, if he blows everybody away, then maybe they got some questions to ask themselves. Yeah.
Okay. So that's going to be interesting. And you think, hey, okay, everybody, the races are over. Everybody can go home, and they can't. Like they're out there testing, and it's it doesn't matter how tired they are. Out for the tests, back out on the track. I guess there are worse things than driving a Formula One car, though, to do for a living. So you might as well enjoy it. Now, Tim. The other driver I want to talk about before we go to questions here is Valtteri Bottas. Finishes the season without a point. And it's sad because he qualified so well and the car finally had some jump to it at the end. And you obviously saw last week in Zhou Guan Yu who got some points finally for the team. So they did get some points before the season ended. But Tim, Valtteri said this week it was a mistake for him when George Russell took over at Mercedes to go to Sauber. And he said, if I could rewind it, I would go a different place. What different place could he have gone to? Like, what were his other options? Do you know?
You know what? I don't. I honestly thought that was going to be the best option for Valtteri was to head over to Sauber. I'm not too sure many teams how much they really coveted having him. I mean, look, it wasn't. I would say back to him, like it didn't seem like it was all like that bad at the beginning, right? But this season for that team has been like horrible, like absolutely horrible. And the way that they had launched updates with the car, I mean, we finally started to see the car become a little bit more competitive towards the end of the season, Adam. Like I would say, the last 3-4 races, I would say like in and around when we got to like Austin, Mexico area, you started to see the Sauber become a little bit more competitive. And then you saw them kind of creeping into the points and you saw better qualifying performances. And I mean, Zhou's story in Qatar was incredible. I thought that was one of the best stories of the Qatar Grand Prix was Zhou scoring the team's points of the season. And so I agree with Valtteri on one point. I don't necessarily agree on the other point. I mean, Frederick Vasseur bringing you in is that's a big thing, right? Like that's a huge sign of respect when you've got a guy like that coming and get you and bringing you on board. And then he was a huge part. Like he was a huge part in bringing Valtteri over to the team before, Fred left for Ferrari.
Is it that he wishes maybe Fred had stuck around, which I mean, I can't blame him for that.
I think so. Yeah, for sure. Because I think there was like a plan. I think there was something that was put in place that maybe had this team on a different trajectory than what they are. And then I think, him leaving, those plans just went in the garbage. Like, it's just.
Can we break any news? Do we know where he's going?
I think he's going to become the reserve driver at Mercedes. That's not confirmed yet, though. But it all of us kind of seem to think that that's the direction that's going to be going for him. And I think it's important to kind of just stay in the game, right? Because we don't know what's going to happen with Kimi Antonelli. Like, not to say that anything, not to say that Kimi's going to struggle or anything like that. We don't really know. Mm-hmm. Believe Kimi's going to be doing some super formula testing, if I'm not mistaken, soon, just to get used to a couple tracks that they're going to be visiting there in 2025, like Suzuka and stuff like that.
Yep, which is a tough track.
Yeah, very tough. I would want to do a lot of testing on it too before I jumped in a Formula One car and jumped on that track.
And it's humid.
Oh yeah, but Adam, I think just having Valtteri sort of hang around, I think it's a smart move because we don't know what's going to happen with this Cadillac GM thing. Like we're not sure what their drivers are going to look like. We're not sure. There is some speculation that Sergio Perez could jump in there. I'm like, well, that's not like 2026. So if he's not racing in 2025, then
yep,
I don't understand that maneuver. But if Valtteri's still hanging around, he's got his hand in the game, still testing, still driving Formula One machinery, then that would be an interesting person to bring over to a team that's starting out.
Yeah, I think so.
But if I'm a team principal, Adam.
Well, right? So on that thing, there are a lot of rumors circulating about a Daniel Riccardo to Cadillac in 2026, where he would sign in 2025, start testing things out, going to tracks, helping them with the knowledge base, and then signing an American driver, a young American driver, to basically, because Daniel has enormous marketability in the United States. He's a veteran, and he could help bring along a younger guy that, obviously Cadillac would hope to contend with by 2028, 2029. What do you think about that plan?
I mean, look, if Daniel's going to be able to find himself a way of, again, like keeping his hand in the game, it's tough when you're just like, okay, I just got, sacked from, Racing Bulls.
Yep.
Now I'm gonna go and just hang out and do whatever. I mean, that's it's tough because you lose a bit of your edge.
Yep.
You lose a tiny bit of that, and you don't want to do that. But I think Daniel has the experience that he could bring to a team like that to help them get up off the ground and get going in the right direction. And that's what you want. Like the same with Audi. I mean, grabbing Nico Hülkenberg was a stroke of genius.
Right.
I mean, that guy, he's kind of like that sort of Carlos Sainz thing where he just comes in and kind of makes your team better, right? With all their knowledge. And so I like that move from Audi. I could see something from Cadillac as well. And then bringing in a young American driver like a Colton Herter or Kyle Kirkwood or something like that.
Well, it'd be very cool.
Maybe even testing a Jack Crawford, who we've had on this show before.
Yes, yeah, that's an interesting one. Yeah, Jack was great, by the way.
Yeah, he was. I mean, I was chatting with him in the paddock over the weekend. He was racing Formula 2, in good spirits. Excited. He's excited for next year, and he could be a possible championship contender in Formula 2. So if he wins the championship there, then why wouldn't you consider Jack Crawford as well? He's young, he's fast, American. Why not?
Yeah, I agree.
It makes sense, Adam, right?
So let's talk about let's do some questions. Let's do the remaining questions here that we might have, because I know there were a lot. And as I said at the event last night, Tim, there were a lot of people who were excited to hear this show. And I got some messages from Instagram going, I can't wait to hear Nail in the Apex. Want to hear it? What's going on? So let's get to those people. Get to the people.
Okay, so from Blue Sky, we got Tamara Sutherland. Big shout out to Tamara Sutherland, because she's fired in a question every single show that we've done. So thanks for that. There's a lot of excitement with several drivers debuting with their new teams for the postseason testing, but other than just a chance to get used to the new cars, what are the tests used for? So there is like the young drivers test, and that's sort of like your younger driver crop that you have. You would kind of want to put them, you would want to put them in to make sure they're getting some running. So like for instance, Alpine told me today that Paul Aaron is going to be doing their young driver test.
Mm-hmm.
And then they're going to have Jack Doohan do the Pirelli tire test. So the Pirelli tire test is used for next year's tires. Like, what are those tires going to look like? And some people may ask, well, they already have the tires. Why do they need to test tires? It's like, well, as each season moves along in a new regulation, the cars become more advanced. They create more downforce, which alters the tire, right? It puts more stress on it. So they have to predict where the teams will be with those downforce levels when we reach 2025. And so they'll do Pirelli tire tests to test what they have, to see where the numbers are, and to see what more they need to do to get to where they feel or predict they're going to be for next season. Christopher Jackson asks, who is actually in the best spot to make an improvement for 2025? Alpine seemed to improve the most, but Haas was right there. Pierre Gasly had a fantastic race, Adam, on Sunday to hold on to sixth in the championship. It was funny. I was running down pit lane there, and I just look over to my left, and it's Flavio Briatore. He's congratulating the entire team. Everybody's hugging him and stuff and gathering around, and great drive from Pierre Gasly to, that allowed them to hold on to that P6, because Jack Doohan there's no way he was cracking into the points this weekend because of the position that Jack was put in. It was great to see Pierre Gasly, obviously no damage this season. So that's also really that's an
impressive. Amazing stat.
It is amazing stat. But Haas was like super competitive. They've looked great this back half of the season. Kevin Magnussen, once he sort of figured out the braking and what he needed from the car to get things done in braking zones, he's been fantastic. Nico Hülkenberg, he's been great all year long. That was a nice little storyline there, Adam, to see a team that was at the back, qualified dead last in Bahrain, had a horrible car, and sort of around Austin, Texas, really just turned their season around with sort of a B-spec car. You really saw them come on strong, got the podiums that they needed to. The one in Brazil was fantastic. It was a great story.
Crazy, isn't it?
But yeah, when you take a look at the evolution of the team, right? The question makes for an interesting answer of like, who will that team be? Because for next year, Adam, I don't see there just being like 3 teams fighting for wins anymore. I see there being like 4, possibly 5. It's kind of like, okay, well, who's going to be that 5th team?
Yeah.
What do you think?
Well, I think my odds on favor would be Aston Martin, but based on performance, it has to be Haas, right? I mean, they've looked amazing in the back half. I'm sure VCAR would love to be in there too. I just don't know if they're going to be, because again of the driver experience and a whole bunch of other things. But if it's not Aston Martin, Tim, they're going to have to be some serious questions asked, right? It needs to be them for their own sake.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. The amount of money that Lawrence has sunk into the team, the amount of recruiting that they've done to go out and get team personnel. I mean, obviously they've moved on from Dan Fallows now, and we'll see what the beginning of the season looks like for them with their car. It could be a bit of a struggle, I think, to start, and it may not get any better until maybe Adrian comes online in March. Mm-hmm. And even then, like, you're looking at maybe a June sort of timeline where you might have a bit of a better picture of what your car could look like. Could there be a B spec type of a car later in the year? I mean, it's a possibility. So, and then Enrico Cardile coming over as well. That's important to have a guy like that as well. And so, a lot of moving parts there still, I think, to come in the off season. But yeah, Adam, like it's tough when both your drivers are giving it everything. Like, I thought Lance did a great job in the race on Sunday to, keep Piastri behind him as long as he could, so he could give Alonso a chance at scoring some points for the team. And, Lance really just sacrificing his race, for the good of the team for Fernando's race. I mean, it's a good team player right there at that moment, because Fernando had put himself in a good position to score some points for the team, finishing ninth. And so, like what both of those drivers, I think, did with the car over the weekend was amazing. I didn't think either one of them could get out of Q2. And somehow Alonso just, I don't know how the hell he does it, man. Like, just like activated God mode again. And
he's good. He's so good.
Somehow finds a few tenths to punch his way into Q3. And I think, like, just for him, he knew it was a good lap, but he just didn't know where that lap had put him. Right.
Mm-hmm.
I think like for the team, it was kind of like, we're going to really struggle to get out of Q1 with Fernando. So it gets out of Q1 because Lance had pace this weekend. Well, he always has pace, but like in terms of like the teammate comparison, I thought Lance was a quicker driver for most of the weekend. And then just somehow Alonso just found just a few tenths somewhere. Just incredible, man.
Yeah.
Incredible. But
amazing.
I mean, great job from both those drivers this season. Really difficult machinery. Yeah, it's been a hard year for that team, and like, yeah, for them to come back swinging, it'd be great. It'd be a great story to see them turn things around. But I like where your head's at with Haas. I think also Alpine we have to factor in.
Have to.
Yeah. We got a couple more questions over on Twitter. Oh, okay. We'll put this one to you first, Adam. Fiona asks, between Lewis Hamilton winning in Silverstone, Charles Leclerc in Monaco, and Lando Norris winning in Miami, which win was the best for you to watch?
Oh, I think Lewis at Silverstone. I think that was for me, like, as much as it meant McLaren didn't win that one. I think Lewis winning at Silverstone was pretty special. Just getting that first win in a Mercedes in several years. And I mentioned it earlier, like you wanted just one more win in a Mercedes for Lewis, and they got it, at Silverstone. Pretty cool.
Yeah, that was awesome. I would agree with you, because I was there for that race, covering it for TSN, and just to hear I remember we were talking about this on our post-race pod, just the noise. Like the crowd noise and how loud it was when Lewis crossed the start-finish line to take the checkered flag, and he had won the British Grand Prix. It was an incredible atmosphere. And then I got to talk to him afterwards, and he told me that like this was one of his best wins of his career, and I have to agree with him. He drove one hell of a race, and for me, Adam, that was also that was probably the best one to watch. I enjoyed watching Charles win in Monaco, though. Don't get me wrong.
Yes. He was great.
He was fantastic. Noah Blake waking up at 4 a.m. to watch Isaac Hadjar try to win the F2 championship just to stall off the line. I knew it was going to be a bad day for my Red Bulls when will Red Bull announce their 2025 lineup? I don't know. I really don't. I'm going to take a guess and say hopefully this week. Maybe by the end of this week we may hear something. But Adam, like, I don't know if you got to watch any of the F2 stuff, but yeah, I understand Noah's frustrations for sure, because honestly, what Gabriel Bortoleto just needed to do was hold on to a position in front of Isaac Hadjar, and he was going to win the championship, and that would have been an incredible championship final. Between those two in that last Formula 2 race, because it was really gearing up for something that was really great. But unfortunately, Hadjar had his issues, unfortunately. Matthew Marshall, can you give a percentage on how likely a World Drivers' Championship for Lewis Hamilton with Ferrari would be next season, in your opinion? Alternatively, why isn't Yuki being given the RB seat? He deserves it. We discussed the Yuki thing, Adam, but the Lewis Hamilton question.
I'm leaving that to you. I have no idea.
Well, how likely do you think it is? I'll answer it too, but
I give it are we doing this out of 10? Or are we doing this percentage? Like, how are we doing this? I give it like a 15 to 20%, which is high when you consider how many big teams there are who can win. Like, you think Red Bull can probably win with Max. McLaren could win with Oscar or Lando. Ferrari could win with Lewis or Charles. We got to see what Mercedes is bringing, right? We got to think that Mercedes is going to be a better team all the way through next year with George. I'm not going to put Kimi in that because it's very few rookies that just come in and just win. Like I think he should have like a top 3, top 4 shot at winning the championship next year, whether or not he does. I think, and so that makes 20% pretty significant. It's going to come down to who gets off the line fastest. I know it sounds ridiculous, but between him and Charles, it's going to be a battle next year.
Yeah, it definitely is. I'm excited to see that. And I think, speaking with Leclerc about this quite a few times, he's excited for the chance to go up against Lewis and to learn from Hamilton. And I think look, I agree with that 20% because of how competitive the field is probably going to be next season. And also, where does Ferrari start? Like, do they start off really well? Because I feel if they can start off really well, I have a feeling they can maintain the performance throughout the season now. I don't think there will be any dips for them. It's just getting out of the gate strong, I think, is going to be important for Ferrari next season. It could be tough for Lewis in 2025, only because all of the new people he's working with, all of the new engineers he's going to have to learn and understand, and the engineers are going to have to learn and understand him as well and what he needs from a car. And I think that is going to be that's going to be a huge mountain for both parties to climb, so they can both because he's losing Bono, right? Like, not having Peter Bonington as your race engineer when he's been engineering you for as long as he has, like, that's huge. Like, that's a relationship that's been going forever, and to not have that, to carry that over to Ferrari, now he's got to rebuild something different, and that's going to take time. But he's Lewis Hamilton, man. Like,
he'll figure it out. What is Bono going to do now with Mercedes? Is he going to still be a race engineer? Or is he moving up?
He's moving up. Like, he'll be moving up at Mercedes, which is great. I mean, he deserves it. He's worked his butt off there for so long, and he deserves it. And look, if I'm Toto Wolff, I'm keeping him on the team too. He's so crucial to the team as well, man. Like, it's just, that's the thing with Formula One now, right? It's just trying to hold on to all your best pieces as tightly as possible without anyone taking them away.
Yeah.
It just is. I mean, I could go into like, hey, Adam, we should do like, there should be transfer windows in the wintertime where we can trade engineers, and that's idea I had, but yeah.
I kind of like that idea. Any other questions, Tim?
No, that's it. Well, okay, but they're all like, we already kind of really touched.
We covered them. So listen, this won't be the last show Tim and I do. I think we'll do an end of season wrap next week, and go through the top stories of the year and the ones to look out for next year. And then Nailing the Apex is going to take a little bit of a breather as the holidays are upon us. And then we'll be back somewhere around the time Drive to Survive is back, and enjoy our mini little off season. But obviously, Tim, if any news breaks, like, Lewis Hamilton leaving for Ferrari, like, last year, we'll jump in for shows, emergency shows, and that sort of thing, too.
100%. Adam, thanks so much for doing this season. It's been a lot of fun, and we got more pods to go, but it's been a ton of fun, man. Yeah,
Tim, congrats on a great season. You've done amazing work. I have to shout you out because I saw one of the sports centers this weekend where you were doing a hit, and it was about Lewis Hamilton, and he was getting into or out of the car behind you, and if you had messed up that hit, you don't get that shot back. So that was we got one shot at this, and you nailed it, man. So well done.
Thanks, dude. Yeah, I was handed the script. I think it was it was like 20 minutes before, and I was also working at the same time. So I was like talking to people, doing things, plus memorizing script off my phone and on the grid.
Mm-hmm. It's awesome, man. It's awesome stuff.
Like, so we needed Lewis getting out of the car.
Yes.
Not getting in. And so that was the crucial point. And I had only practiced it once. And then our camera operator said, all right, we're going. And I'm like, oh my God, I hope I don't screw this up.
You nailed it, man. It was a great shot. One of the best of your career, I would say. Like, it's just such a magic shot. It's amazing. So well done.
Thanks, buddy.
No. So far. It's always so far. All right, buddy. Have a good one, and we'll talk next week.
Cool. Thanks, Adam.